Welcome, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon to yet another milestone registered by IG Business and Finance through its arm of the Finance Leadership Forum. Sometime at the beginning of the year, we made a promise to our viewers and followers that every month we'll plan to have a webinar where finance professionals will gather and discuss burning issues affecting the profession. Today is not an exception. The topic that is chosen, which actually identifies the role that should be played by a finance professional in all facets of life. And the team today is coordinating the fight against financial crimes. It's a topic which is not very popular in the country. And even though if it is normally given to financial institutions and regulators. But I believe today with the panelists that we have, all the accountants, auditors, tax consultants will understand their role as far as the financial crime is concerned and what is their responsibility. My name is Salih Fuba, the coordinator or the co-coordinator of this event. I'm here to introduce our able host for the program today, Mr. Ansumana Cham. Mr. Ansu holds an MA, which is Master of Art, and a BSc with the University of the Gambia. I am proud to say that he is made in Gambia. Mr. Cham is a certified anti-money laundering specialist. Mr. Cham also has over 13 years of experience in the banking industry, both locally and internationally. Currently, Mr. Cham is an Associate Director, Financial Crime Compliance with Standard Chartered Bank, Frankfurt in Germany, where he is making his call today. Intermittently, he was acting as the head of FCC with Standard Chartered Bank Gambia. And Mr. Cham started his career with Access Bank. Without wasting much time, I would like all the participants to join me and welcome Mr. Ansumana Cham. Over to you, Mr. Cham. Thank you.
Thank you, Salifu, for that introduction. I am glad to be part of this forum, which is one of the most important, one of the most profitable industry in the world, because it is estimated that over $2.1 trillion it's been lost to the world, the global economy, through financial crime. So this shows that this topic is quite important for us in the industry and in the Gambia. I'd like to know why we should discuss this particular topic and also have experts on board to share their views and also proffer solutions to the policymakers, in terms of how to join hands and fight financial crime globally. So today we have a very experienced panelists on board. First panelist that we have is called Madam or Mrs. Ida Faiture. Ida is an MBA holder and a bachelor's degree holder from St. Mary's University. She has 21 years of regulatory compliance experience in the financial services industry. She is currently the head of FCC, that is Conduct Financial Crime and Compliance for SCB Gambia. Ida has previously worked with the Central Bank of the Gambia for nearly 17 years, where she was responsible for financial institutions. Ida is a leading financial crime compliance expert with excellent communication skills. I welcome Mrs. Ida Faiture today to this forum. And second, Modulamin Kante. He started his career with the AA and Co. accountants, where he was a senior auditor. So welcome on board, Mr. Kante. The third panelist we have today is Miss Aissatou Jaite. Aissatou is another experienced and certified financial compliance specialist. She is currently the head of compliance for Zenith Bank Gambia. She previously worked with the Medical Research Council as an intern. So welcome on board, Madam Jaite. Last but not the least is Abdullah Mbo. Mr. Mbo is a senior compliance officer with the Financial Intelligence Unit. Prior to this, apply work with the Access Bank and Guarantee Trust Bank. In both banks, he was involved in the internal control department. Today, these are the panelists we have today. And I believe by the end of this forum, you'll all learn something very important that we can take home. And it will also be an opportunity for people to know why it is important to fight financial crime, because this is really affecting our economies. So, like I said, we have 4 panelists here. All of them are specialists in this area, and they've quite substantial amount of experience, and they would be glad to answer all the questions that we have for them today. So the first question goes to all panelists. From your perspective, why do you think it is important to fight financial crimes?
So, thank you, Ansu, for the opportunity to be here. From my own perspective, financial crime today is really today is more expensive, and it is also complex and technology driven. And I think for me, the criminals are really winning, of course, in this fight, because the impact it is causing on our people, the impact it is causing on our communities, and the impact it is causing on our environment. We look at the illegal wildlife trade is real, is very real. So I think it is important that we fight financial crime, one, to protect ourselves, and I mean ourselves, to protect our firms, to protect our organizations, to protect our both public and private from direct financial losses, because the impact of financial losses will really affect performance, will really affect reputation as well, legal and reputational risk. It is not just to me protecting ourselves. We need to protect our consumers as well. But we all know that consumers really want a quick and seamless activity in terms of service. So to protect them, we need also to protect them from being a victim of financial crime. And I think it's really important, and especially when it comes to elderly people. For example, there are some people that cannot use the internet. So I think protecting ourselves from these the firms, the organization, as well as the consumers really is important. And I'll also touch on maybe regulatory, and I will leave the others to come in. In terms of regulatory, there are some of these massive fines on bribery and corruption and sanctions. So I think in terms of general compliance violation, we need to ensure that we protect ourselves from regulatory fines, because it's not just the fine that is the issue. It is also the cost of remediation. So I think with these 3 points, maybe the rest will come up. That's my own point, that it is important that we fight financial crime together. Thank you.
Good morning, Ansu. If I may come in.
Yes, Abdullah, you can go ahead.
Yes, thank you for having me for this session. And indeed, it is very, very important to fight financial crime. However, just like you have mentioned in your introduction, that about $2.1 trillion is lost to as a result of global financial crime. So the amount of money that is lost is really massive. Coming down to our African continent, if you look at it, there was a report that was produced by a commission that was instituted by the African Union, and the commission was chaired by the former South African president, Mr. Thabo Mbeki. And in that report, they highlighted that annually, Africa could be losing more than $50 billion in terms of illicit financial flows. So the amount of money that is being lost by African continents is really massive. So it is very, very important to fight financial crime in order that these monies will stay in the continent and then it can be used for economic development and economic growth. So I think it is very, very important that financial crime is given due attention and fight properly. Thank you. That's my contribution.
Good morning, good afternoon to the fellow panelists and participants on this call. I'm truly glad to be part of this discussion, which is very key, centered to everything that we do. So I think we have had the statistics quoted in terms of financial crimes, the volume of illicit money being processed through the financial system, but only taking note that this is what can be accounted for. Bearing in mind that there is much more out there that cannot be accounted for. So I was just saying, in terms of why we need to fight financial crimes, I think it's important we know what the impacts of financial crimes are. So my earlier panelists have spoken about the economic impact that it has globally, and Mo has taken it down to Africa, how it is impacting on us. And I feel we need to take it further down from a global level, from a regional level, from institutional level, and even from individual level. Because financial crimes do have a lot of cost attached. It's not only the financial cost aspect of it, it also has some social impact going down to individual levels. Let's take the examples of drug traffickers, because they produce illicit money and would want to do this, launder this through the financial system. What is the impact of that substance that they sell? How has it impacted on our societies? How has it impacted on our youthful population that is needed for the development of our nation? So it has gone a long way. It has gone beyond what is the responsibility of financial institutions in fighting financial crimes. I see it as a responsibility for every individual that sleeps and awake in this continent, that we have a responsibility not only to protect our institutions, but also to protect ourselves and the society that we belong to. So I think it's important that we put heads together and fight financial crimes, not because the authorities want us to fight it, but because we have a stake in it. We have an interest in fighting this menace that is rapidly encouraging. We have seen the work of terrorist organizations wherever they go, and some of their funding comes from illicit money. So fighting financial crimes is, in a way, safeguarding societies from these terrorist activities. So I think it's an important topic that we're discussing here today. And as we go into the discussions, we'll come to appreciate more, not only at institutional level, but at individual level. Because if you look at the FATF recommendations and the various country legislations, they try to put the responsibilities of fighting financial crimes, not only to institutions, but also to individuals working within the institutions and even outside of the institutions. So I think it's a collective responsibility, which with a mutual interest for all. So I stop there for now.
Just to add on to what my colleagues have said, I think financial crime has multiple ramifications, and on the economy, on individuals, as well as on society. So the statistics have been quoted, but most importantly is that what we need to look at in terms of when we talk about financial crime is indeed look at how it is even how we are going to preserve our integrity as a country. I think it has some integrity issue in a country. If a country is notorious for financial crime, at the global stage, I think it drives away investment, and investors would not focus on the, putting in the needed investment in the country due to the fears of financial crime. One of my colleagues has also rightly mentioned that it also, at a human level, it has so much of effect that if financial crime has gone to the extent that people may not feel very safe in terms of how they operate in the society. For example, if a country that has a lot of human trafficking incidents, it puts fear in the hearts of the countrymen, and that in turn has a lot of effects on the people in the economy. But as a financial institution practitioner, I'm looking at the financial service industry, where I believe most of the real data in terms of financial crime occurrences are. It bends on us as banks that we fight financial crime in order for us to avoid the requisite fines that may be imposed upon us by the relevant regulators, because regulators, in fact, have made it a point of duty to implementing regulations that are geared towards taking money away from financial institutions. These are some of the few reasons why I feel there's a need for us to fight financial crime. Although there are multiple of reasons which we would address on as the discussion progresses.
Thank you all of you for your contribution on this question. So in summary, you could say that the economic and social consequences of money laundering or financial crime are just huge. For example, the social cost of rehabilitating drug addicts, the social cost of maintaining law and order, the reputational risk that countries may face if financial crime becomes an issue, because if a country is well known for or is a haven for financial criminals, I mean that country's financial system or banking system might be denied access to the global financial system, because it will be very difficult for banks in other parts of the world to maintain relationship with them, or the cost of maintaining relationship might be higher. Because once a country is designated as a high-risk country, it makes it very, very difficult for you to be able to access the global financial system. For example, maintaining correspondent banking accounts, making transfers, a lot of things, challenges might come with it. And it's not only that, like the panelists have said, it can make the country economics or the financial ministry or the central bank might make mistakes in terms of making decisions about the economy, and it will discourage investors. So this is why, like the panelists said, it's very, very important for all of us to join hands and fight financial crime in our country and the world at large. So thank you for answering that questions. We have the second question, which is, how do legal entities or natural persons partake in committing financial crime?
Okay. The legal entity for me alone cannot stand to commit the crime. And so, can you hear me? So it requires the natural person to use the legal entity as a vehicle to commit this crime, either by self-companies or self-companies. Because of the product and services I say that they provide, those are things that natural persons are attracted to. So the legal person alone can stand. The natural person needs to have the legal person to be as a vehicle in order to commit this crime.
I just want to pick up from where I sort of stopped. I hope I'm being heard.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. So for financial institutions, for example, as legal entities, you have different forms of legal entities that could partake in financial crimes as well as individuals. So let's take the examples of financial institutions. By virtue of the services that they provide, there is an inherent financial crime risk. Because if you look at the faces of financial crimes, from the scene of the crime to the end product to get it into the system, you need some kind of financial services to get this done. The financial service is very important. And that's why, even though financial institutions are not individuals, I think they're basically made up of the individuals that work in the financial institutions. However, they have a responsibility to ensure that the right controls are in place to take care of the inherent financial risk in the businesses that they do provide. So not doing or not having the right controls, the right governance in place could expose a financial institution to a financial crime risk crystallizing. And in that case, they will be liable by law. Let's say you have, for example, if you look at the local regulations as well, financial institutions are also obliged to report to support in the fight against financial crimes. But if you do not have the right frameworks in place, if you don't have the right policies in place, if you don't have the right individuals to man these policies and controls, then you will fail that obligation of reporting financial crimes to the regulatory authorities. By failing to report, or by failing to detect, or by failing to put in place the right frameworks to detect, you are partaking in financial crimes as an institution. So I think we should bear that in mind. In addition, so if you look at the regulations of most jurisdictions, you have individual liability and you have entity liability. So no individual is immune to financial crimes compliance breaches. It's from individual to entity level. So I've spoken about financial institutions and given an example of what it would mean to partake in financial crimes, because definitely the criminal would at some point need the financial system to ensure that they disguise the origin of their funds. So if we allow our systems to be used in a manner that criminals can easily place and layer, integrate their funds, then we're basically contributing to financial crimes in our respective jurisdiction. And I think that's why it's so important that we do that. Then you move on to other legal entities. I think we will discuss this further as we move into the discussions wherein you call them the gatekeepers. This could be non-financial institutions, yet still legal entities. Let's take the examples of lawyers, accountants, or tax consultants. In most of the cases, the criminals will need them to prepare all the necessary documents to make it seem as if the money is coming from illicit proceed of funds. And these individuals also do have an obligation to report if they detect any unusual or activities through their engagements with their clients. So where they fail to acquire the necessary knowledge or to put in place the necessary controls to detect and report, they could also be seen as partaking or contributing or supporting the undertaking of financial crimes. And also institutions, legal entities do have a responsibility to ensure that the individuals placed and given the responsibilities to run the institution do have a very good knowledge of financial crimes and the controls around it. Otherwise, they've also failed their obligations in fighting financial crimes. And when you fail in your obligation in other ways, in other words, you're basically contributing to the menace. So I'm looking at it from responsibilities, and failing responsibilities would mean basically contributing or partaking in the crime itself.
Thank you, Ada. Yeah, Abdullah or Mr. Kante, do you want to add?
Okay, yes. Let me come in. One of the ways that legal entities could partake in financial crime is by setting up very complex ownership structures. Ownership structures that makes it very difficult to identify what we call the beneficial ownership of such legal entities. Companies that have very complex structures, companies owned by other companies or other companies in other jurisdictions. For instance, the recent or that Panama paper that was revealed point to the fact that certain legal entities were using complex ownership structures, using companies in various jurisdictions, especially jurisdictions where we have very weak controls or very weak legal regimes around financial crime, to be able to perpetrate financial crime. So legal entities do use complex ownership structures, and oftentimes some of the ownerships are not necessarily in country. They can be across countries. They can be in certain jurisdictions where even it makes it very difficult to obtain beneficial ownership information. That is one of the ways that legal entities partake in financial crime. For legal persons, of course, they also have the tendency by creating layers, by having trustee arrangements, settler arrangements, that helps to conceal the true purpose or intent of the legal person. For example, if someone comes to in a banking setup to open an account under a trustee arrangement, the bank is obligated to ensure that it unveils and unwraps the person that is the true person behind the account. This helps to identify potential incidences of perpetration of financial crime by individuals. Just my colleagues have also said in other aspects, but I feel these are the two major or key areas that individuals and entities could partake in the financial crime.
Thank you, Kante. Abla, it seems you want to add something.
Yes, just to add on to what Kante was saying with respect to beneficial ownership, because that is one very important area in fighting financial crime. Because most times you have people who commit crimes, and in order to legitimize their criminal gains, they would establish companies, let's say in one jurisdiction and another company in another jurisdiction. So what they will do is these two companies will be conniving to move transactions from one jurisdiction to another. And in so doing, they are actually moving the money or the value of the transaction from one jurisdiction to another. This can be done usually through what is called over-invoicing or under-invoicing, or different forms of techniques that can be used to actually move money from one jurisdiction to another. So legal entities really, I think beneficial ownership is very important when it comes to fighting financial crime.
I just want to go back to the point that Abdullah just
Yes.
spoke about, just looking at the beneficial owners. And I still link it back to responsibilities of legal entities, particularly financial institutions, which are usually depended upon by these legal entities to place their funds. And that's where financial institutions do have a responsibility to unwrap, because by the time you unwrap legal entities, you would know who is behind the in question, and that will help identify and red flag whatever needs to be so that the funds are captured. So I think it's very important also that as financial institutions, going back to my point, is we put in the necessary controls in place to try as much as within. There is no control that is 100%, to be quite frank. There is no control that is able to guarantee a financial crimes-free system. But the more we tighten our controls, the more we put in the necessary governance structures and control frameworks, the more we're able to help in the fight against financial crimes. And like I said, I want to reiterate, if financial institutions or legal entities fail on their responsibilities to help the authorities identify, we're in a way also partaking in financial crimes, in addition to actually being set up to disguise funds. Lack of taking up our responsibilities would also mean partaking in financial crimes.
That is quite important, and in fact, it leads us to our third question, which is, what measures could be taken by stakeholders, financial institutions, regulators, law enforcement agencies, to coordinate in the fight against financial crime? So this question, I would direct it to you, Ida, to lead us in the discussion in terms of measures that could be put in place to fight financial crime in the system, in our country and globally.
Thank you, Ansumana. I am always a believer of this statement that financial crimes is one thing that we do not have to compete on. It is not a fight that should be on the basis of competition. It is one fight that requires putting heads and hands together. And this collaboration between individual, between entities, at global level, at national level. And if you look at how the fight is structurally managed from global level down to institutional level, let's say, for example, you have a lot of organizations that are out there to coordinate the fight. You can name but a few. And the major body is FATF. The reason why FATF is set up is to help in this coordination and coordinated approach to the fight against money laundering. Then you go into other groups like the Egmont Group, which brings together FIUs. And the whole reason is to come together and coordinate, share experiences, share thoughts, and put a way forward to the fight. Then you come to regional level, you have this FATF-style regional bodies. The whole idea is also still to coordinate. Because if you look at the way financial crime works, the money would not necessarily have been generated in the jurisdiction where it has been laundered. So nobody should be under the impression that I can do it alone. And that's why we need a collaborative effort within financial institutions. If you look at Gambia, for example, we have set up what we call the Association of Chief Compliance Officers. And the whole idea is to coordinate between ourselves and ensure we exchange information, give feedback to each other, and help us in enhancing our structures. From the regulatory environment, the regulator is the one issuing out regulations in the fight against financial crimes. But the regulator cannot do it alone as well, because bearing in mind that these are not financial experts on the ground meaning the ones really handling financial transactions. So in coming out with this regulation, the financial regulators, the FI, would usually come into collaboration with the other stakeholders, such as the FIs and the other non-FIs entities in country. And this together gives us that collaborative efforts that we need to fight it. We've been talking about statistics since at the beginning, and from the World Economic Report, it's 2.5% of global GDP actually from illicit proceeds. And it is stated that only less than 1% of this is seized. And so I look at it from the number that we are talking about is actually that which can be accounted for. We have much more outside. And even that which can be accounted for, we can only hold on to 1%. So it tells you the level of collaboration that is required from the law enforcement agencies to individuals, I keep saying it, to financial institutions and to regulators. And one major important aspect of the collaboration is feedback between financial institutions and the regulators and the law enforcement agents as well. Sharing of information is also very important. We need to find a platform where we can share information with the law enforcement agents, with the FIs, with the regulators, so that we at least know what is happening around us. And I applaud things like typology studies, because a typology study would basically give some kind of an understanding of what is happening around us. And once we know what is happening around us, then we will know where the red flags are and where we need to focus our attention on. So I think basically we all have a responsibility to talk to each other, to share platforms, to share information, to give feedbacks, so that we're able to come together to fight it. And in terms of feedback, let me make reference to filing of suspicious transactions, for example. Financial institutions do spend a lot of money on their compliance system, all to detect, identify, and file to the respective authorities. So once we file, and there is nothing coming back from the regulator in terms of what is the outcome of information that we have spent funds on to generate and report, then it's basically, that feedback would have added to the strength of the financial institution to see where they need to enhance, where they need to look more into, and where they need to put more energy on, or focus their resources on. So I think we, in a nutshell, the responsibility between the key stakeholders is one of cooperation, collaboration, sharing of information, giving feedback in order to push the fight further.
Thank you very much. This question is greatly consistent with FATF's recommendation too, which requires that nation states should coordinate the efforts against money laundering and terrorism financing, but broadly speaking, financial crime. And organizations, governments, and law enforcement agencies, in my opinion, should be sharing information and data that is needed to combat financial crime. And one of such ways that we can do so is to create financial information sharing platforms. I set an example. For example, I understand the fact that Hong Kong, the United States, the UK, Canada, Australia have this financial information partnership framework, and it has helped a lot. It has yielded dividends. Within the first 4 months of implementation of activity, for instance, Hong Kong has registered about 60 cases and then collected about 2 million Hong Kong dollars, according to Regulators. The same thing happens in the UK. The UK collected about 70 million pounds within a span of 4 months of implementation of the information sharing partnership. The UK of recent also had made and arrested a lot of senior executive of criminals, and evidence pointed to the fact that most of those information were gathered from the financial information sharing partnership arrangement that they have with the various stakeholders. So I felt that one of the key aspect that we need to look at when it comes to coordination is the sharing of information, which is very key. If I want to add another point to it, is that we also need to look at legal and regulatory reforms. In the Gambia, we have made significant strides around legal and regulatory reform. The Gambia has, for example, criminalized most what we call predicate offenses: drug trafficking, sexual harassment, human trafficking, with the exception of a few, like market manipulation, insider information, which of course over time, we believe that the legislative framework would bring into light some of those predicate offenses into light to help have an all-rounded criminalized framework for financial crime. Another way that I've also looked at is in terms of technology. I think there's generally a room for improvement around information sharing in terms of access and availability of what? Information on beneficial ownership, information on identification.
In fact, Mr. Kante, not to cut you short, we have another question which is quite related to that comment.
Before you, can I just make a contribution?
Yes, Abdullah.
I just want to add on to what Kante was saying and Ida, because Ida touched on in terms of coordination, the global aspect,
yes,
which is the Financial Action Task Force.
Yes.
And then regionally, you have GIABA, and then institutionally, you also have the Committee of Chief Compliance Officers. But at a national level, you also have a coordination mechanism, which was as a result of FATF recommendation 2. And that coordination mechanism is actually called National Coordinating Committee, which was set up as a result of Section 91 of the Anti-Money Laundering and Terrorism Financing Act. So this committee has been in existence, and it's actually geared towards coordinating the national fight against financial crime. So I just wanted to add that to what Ida and Kande actually were saying.
Thank you, Abdullah, for that information.
Thank you, Abdullah. Thank you, Abdullah, for that information.
Much. Yes, I think banks would definitely leverage on this.
Hello, Ansu, can I just add something on it?
Yes, I said you can go ahead.
Okay, I just want to talk on what Ida mentioned about sharing of information. I think Mahmoud Lamin also said there is a need for platform, which is right. I think information sharing is really key in this fight, which can be done confidentially as well as securely if we have a platform, which helps to ensure that we have the right information and the intelligence to be available to those within the financial crime compliance. But however, in this, I will see some challenges in terms of sharing information where we have for data protection, privacy, and bank secrecy laws and all that. They've mentioned the fact, of course, I think there was a guideline in 2017 regarding information sharing. So I think information sharing is key, and then also the information shared, there should be trust among the parties, where we can have a successful combat in this fight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question would go to Mr. Kante. That is, to what extent would technology enable in the fight against financial crime? To what extent would technology enable in the fight against financial crime?
Thank you, Mr. Ansumana. Technology is indeed a very important component of the fight. At the institutional level, at the financial institutional level, I think the focus now is more on the data mining, artificial intelligence, big data, just to focus on not the transactional dynamics of clientele, of our customers, but also to focus on the behavioral indicators, just to show that Ida has rightly mentioned that of the $2.1 trillion financial crime, the volume of financial crime of $2.1 trillion that she mentioned, that about less than 1% is detected. So one of the ways that the technology could help is by ensuring that we adopt the right technology, the right metrics, and conduct the right analysis that would ensure that we have the real data that would help investigators to carry out their investigations. And one of such ways that we can do that is by adopting, as I mentioned earlier, artificial intelligence, big data analysis, machine learning. All these have helped greatly towards the fight and has helped to increase the numbers in terms of the reporting and convicted cases. Another way that technology could also help at the government level is by having information sharing platforms, information access databases. For example, in our context as Gambia, it would have been very ideal if we have an infrastructure where we could have access to the identity information of people, their identity details, so access to beneficial ownership information. This would help also towards the fight against the financial crime. These are my two contributions towards that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kante. I have another question for Mr. Mbo. Mr. Mbo, you are working with the FIU, and your role is quite important in the fight against financial crime. What strategies would you suggest to financial institutions to fight financial crime? What do you think they should put in place to make sure that financial crime is detected and prevented?
Yes, Ansu, thank you very much for this question. This is a very important question because financial institutions are at the heart and the core, in this fight. Now, the strategies that financial institutions can implement, actually, I would suggest financial institutions to refer to the Financial Action Task Force Preventive Measures, the 40 recommendations. There is a section that is called Preventive Measures, which is from recommendation 9 to recommendation 21. Now, these recommendations actually require financial institutions to put in place control mechanisms to prevent their systems from being used as a gateway to launder money. They are very important recommendations. You have recommendations on customer due diligence, recommendations on politically exposed persons, recommendation on record keeping, wire transfers, internal controls, reporting of suspicious transactions, and even tipping off. These are very important preventive measures that financial institutions should put in place to prevent their systems from being used as a gateway to launder money. Now, these FATF recommendations are actually just recommendations. They are not laws. So countries are actually required to put them into laws in order to enforce them appropriately. That is why most of these preventive measures were included in the AML-CTF Act of the Gambia, which was enacted in 2012. And Section 39 of the Act also requires financial institutions to actually put in place preventive measures to protect their systems. Now, some of these preventive measures include designating an individual who should be at a senior management level as the compliance officer of the institution. Because if the person is not at a senior management level, the person may not be able to have influence, or the person may not be able to have authority to be able to implement certain policies and programs geared towards protecting the institution. The institutions is also required to implement policies and procedures regarding customer identification and acceptance. These are things that were actually drawn from the FATF recommendation 10, which was purely on customer due diligence. The institutions also must implement effective training programs. Training is very key in terms of fighting financial crime, because criminals are always evolving. They are always changing, and financial institutions also need to evolve in order to catch up with what they are doing. And the training has to cut across all the staff of the institution, not just operational staff. Even senior management and board of directors should be trained on AML CTF, because they drive the policies of the institution. They should be aware of what is required by a financial institution. So it is important that they are actually trained effectively and efficiently in order that so that they will be able to understand and implement effective policies to protect their institutions. Now, financial institutions must also conduct risk assessment on their customers, on their products, on their services, on their geographic locations, because without risk assessment, it is very difficult for a financial institution to understand really what its risk is. And it is very important for financial institutions to understand their risk. Number one, where is the risk coming from? Is it coming from my customers? Is it coming from my products? Now, once a financial institution is able to identify its risk, then it should be able to put in place measures to actually mitigate its exposure to that kind of risk. Another very important strategy that financial institutions should also take into consideration is conducting of transaction monitoring. Transactions occur daily in financial institutions, and it is very important that they are monitored in order to be able to detect suspicious ones and then escalate those suspicious ones to the regulator or to the financial intelligence unit for effective resolution. So I think these strategies, once implemented by the financial institutions, they can actually go a long way in protecting their system from being used as a gateway to launder money or financial or finance terrorism. These strategies are, like I mentioned, the FATF Preventive Measures Recommendation 9 to 21 and Section 39 of the Anti-Money Laundering and Terrorism Financing Act of the Gambia.
I just wanted to add, I think Abdullah has made a very good deliberation on the strategies for financial institutions. Just to add, just one thing to add, in addition to the control measures and whatever, I think one of the key areas that financial institutions do fail is the governance arrangement that they do put in place to look over the policies and procedures and whatever. I think it's very important, Abdullah, to look at financial institutions governance. You can have a compliance officer with a so-called authority to take decisions. But what government arrangements have been put in place by financial institutions to ensure that this individual is able to execute its authority without fear?
Yeah, that is quite important. I agree with you, Ida. For financial institutions to appoint a compliance officer or a chief compliance officer, or in some countries, money laundering officer, the person must be senior enough and should be given sufficient resources and authority to be able to prevent financial crime within the institution. So by just giving mere title without the person being authoritative enough, or maybe very low in the management cadre, I think that would also not help in terms of the strategies to prevent financial crime. So by appointing an MLRO or CMLCO, having in place robust policies and procedures, then training the staff on so that they can be aware about what money laundering is, the risk that the bank faces if they fail to comply with the laws and regulations that are in place. So I think that is quite important. Thank you, Abdullah and Aida, for that. Next question would go to Aisatu. Aisatu, you've been in this industry for a while. You are now, I can say, one of the top, experts, in the Gambian context. So, what would, how will stakeholders tackle challenges associated with financial crime? The stakeholders we mentioned, the financial institutions, the regulators, law enforcement agencies, and even the private sector, civil society organizations. What challenge? How would they tackle the challenges that are associated with the fight against financial crime?
Okay. Answer this. The challenges, I would say, in terms of, I'll just touch on stakeholders. I think in terms of stakeholders, I'll look at investors, especially for financial institutions. I think Ida mentioned a lot about that in this. I think there is a need for them to, like you said, compliance should start at the top. So when you look at the investors, I'm looking at them knowing the importance of fighting financial crime. And then there is need to ensure that they chip in from the top. Look at in terms of technology, let's not say, okay, compliance is expensive or the fight is expensive. So they're looking at their profit side of it. I would say that they need to not look at the profit side, but look at the cost of non-compliance when it comes to stakeholders in terms of investors. As in terms of um, our team members that are employees as well under stakeholders, I think that they also have a role to play to ensure that they understand their role and responsibility as far as the system security of the organization is concerned. Also, I'll touch on our clients as well. We need to ensure and know that they are also victims of these crimes, and then we need to educate them. For example, I'm looking at in terms of fraud when it comes to our clients. We've seen online frauds coming on, especially with the COVID-19 that is going on. Now, our clients, our customers, our consumers need to know how, what role they play in terms of this fight. That is, when they see red flags or unusual activities, even they can also blow the whistle. And then also, when you look at that, like you said, the stakeholders, information sharing, we've also talked about that. On the side of the regulators, I would say that there's a need to establish that national mechanism to ensure that we have that adequate cooperation and coordination. We have said that there is need for more cooperation and coordination to play at the policy level, of course, where you have between ministries and operational agencies. Also, I'll talk on the policymakers. I think there's also need to have that strict regulation in place, because a lot of the times banks will default, banks will not comply. And if you have that strict regulation and also ensure that they have an oversight, enhance their oversight in terms of supervision and monitoring. I'm talking of the regulatory side as well. So straight in, because we haven't touched, okay, I'd say we have touched the DNFVPs also, which is my concern, as they also play a crucial role in this fight. They're always a victim, the highest risk of fraud. So in terms of regulation, the regulators, I also want them to enhance their oversight in terms of supervision and monitoring them. So I'll also look at in the Gambia, I think there's also need to strengthen our citizens, like Muslim mentioned, in terms of our identification system, because it's so that we can have that harmonized, relevant identification database in place. So those are my take on that.
Okay, thank you very much, Aisatu, for your contribution. I would like to ask one last question, then we can move to the Q&A session. What is the responsibility of finance professionals in the fight against financial crime? Or their role, for example, the accountants, the auditors, the tax consultants, and even those who are not financial institutions, but they are like the real estate agents.
So I think I
Okay, thank you, Ansu.
that
Okay.
already.
Hello?
Hello, Ansu.
Yes.
I have even touched on that as their role to ensure that the way how they partake in financial crime. These people are the ones that will usually prepare their ledgers, prepare their accounts. Like I've read from one of my research. There was a guy who was a fraudster, and he was what question he posed was like, their papers are always accurate, but what the financial institution fails to do is to verify those papers to see first that their papers are always accurate. If they bring out their documents, it's always accurate. But what he said was, what is the financial institution doing in terms of verifying those documents? So I think they have a role to play, like Ida mentioned. They're the ones preparing their ledgers, and they have a crucial role to play. So they need to, I'm just looking at the instances where they will come up with, in terms of information sharing, they will tell you the secrecy law, customer secrecy, customer protect our customer. They need to ensure that in terms of sharing information, that is what my take is, to ensure that when questions are asked, let them respond, not where in terms they will tell you, oh, my customer secrecy, data protection, as we all know that, but I'm looking at that aspect. That is a challenge I see, and if we can tackle that to ensure that they do not follow their trail of saying we cannot share information because of our customers' security.
Yeah,
So
but
what I want
quickly
to
go ahead.
emphasize is the fact that the gatekeepers, the DNF, the designated non-financial businesses and professions, such as accountants and auditors, are very critical in the fight against financial crime. And FATF has considered it so much important that he has dedicated a special guidance paper. The Financial Action Task Force has dedicated a special guidance paper on the role of accountants in the fight against money laundering. And special attention, according to the guidance paper, should be paid to a number of considerations. For example, in terms of buying and selling of real estate, in terms of managing client monies, securities, or other assets, in terms of management of bank, saving or security accounts, in terms of organizations of contributions for the creation, operation, or management of company. So basically, it's a myriad of obligations that are on the accountant profession in terms of auditors, accountants, and as well as on the legal practitioners as to the obligations against the fight of financial crime. And FATF's guidance paper specifically speaks to recommendation 10 on customer due diligence. They said they are obliged to ensure that they carry out customer due diligence in each of these circumstances when buying and selling real estate, when they are managing clients' money or securities or other assets, and as well as when they are managing bank savings or security accounts. So one of the other obligations that the profession has is also in the event of carrying out this customer due diligence, if they happen to come across a suspicious activity, is for them to report to the applicable authority, which is recommendation 16. Abdullah, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Recommendation 16 on suspicious activity reporting, and the authority to report to in this case is the Financial Intelligence Unit. I think that that has dealt with that question.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ansumana. Just a short addition to this. I think Kante has taken it up with ISA to appropriately. But I just wanted to add, I think one of our major challenges we have is this misconception that the fight against financial crime is only the responsibility of financial institutions. Other financial professions and non-financial professions do have similar obligations as the financial institutions in their own space. And Kante has mentioned a few together with Isaac. Just to add.
Thank you. Thank you. I have some questions from the participants. One coming from Malik Ba. His question is, how can individuals, what is the role of the Financial Intelligence Unit? So I believe Abdullah can help us with that answer. What is the role of the Financial Intelligence Unit, FIU?
Yes, the role of the FIU is actually, to bridge the gap between the Financial Intelligence Unit and law enforcement agencies, in the sense that Financial Intelligence Unit are mandated to report what is called suspicious transaction reports to the FIU. Now, these reports, once they are reported, they are merely suspicion. They are not facts actually per se to say that the customer was involved in money laundering. The financial institution suspects. So the FIU would review the report, analyze it, and then actually disseminate the report to the law enforcement agency for further action. So that's the role of the FIU. The FIU receives, analyze, and disseminate reports from reporting entities to law enforcement agencies for further action.
Thank you. And
okay, and sorry, Anso, and on top of the question, what he asked was, and how can individuals communicate with the FIU to exchange data? I think that is very critical, because what Abdullah mentioned is at institutional level, but what about at individual level? Because you were saying during the presentation that individuals have responsibility. I think what Malik is asking is in terms of data sharing, with individual as well, or how can individuals share information with FIU?
In short, can I, as an individual, report suspicion to the FIU directly? Like, I suspect that someone is committing crime or is involved in financial crime. Can I go to the FIU? Maybe, and what channels do you have in place? Can I send an email? Can I write a letter? Or can I walk into your office on Senegambia? Is it Senegambia? And report?
The challenge with it is not actually discouraged, but in terms of documentation might be a challenge. Like supporting documents to support the report, because supporting documents are very important when it comes to these issues. So individuals can report, but it has to be supported with appropriate supporting documents.
Absolutely.
Because financial institutions and DNFBPs are in a better position to have real supporting documents to back whatever they are reporting. Because you just cannot report by word of mouth, and you cannot even substantiate, or you cannot have enough evidence to prove or to support your report. So that is usually the issue when it comes to individual reporting, but it is not discouraged actually. Individuals can report, but the issue of documentation may be a challenge to individual reporting.
Okay. And another.
Can I add to that?
Yes, I just wanted to add one more question before you go ahead, because someone asked or cited about the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK. I think it came from Mr. Sinera. So, is it safe to say that the FIU is the central coordinating agency for receiving information related to financial crime in the Gambia?
Yes. The FIU is the only institution mandated by law to receive STR, suspicious transaction. There is no other institution that is mandated by law. It's only the FIU that is mandated.
Basically, you coordinate with other agencies like the police or the NIA or the Ministry of Justice when it comes to things, or foreign ministry and the like. So you coordinate with them.
Exactly. That is why I talked about the coordination at the national aspect, earlier.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Someone asked, what are some of the major financial crimes happening in the Gambia at the moment? So what are some of the, if I would translate it in the financial crime terminology, what are some of the predicate crimes?
Fraud remains, a very important aspect when it comes to crime.
Absolutely.
Fraud takes different forms, So what I think fraud is number one when it comes to, existing predicate crimes in the Gambia.
And proceeds of corruption, just to add.
Proceeds of, it's quite important, especially in our part of the world. I think we are seriously affected by corrupt practices. Money is being diverted, to others, individual benefits instead of benefiting the people in the country, supporting the health and the education sector and other vital sectors. Okay, another question.
Actually, we have one question from Mr. Abdul Kadir Sise, who asks, are there inherent features or factors in our economy that creates fertile grounds for financial crime in both public and private sector? And how are these factors being addressed?
Sure. For me, one of the inherent features that I see in our economy is that we are in a cash-based economy, and we all know cash is one of the most attractive way of financial crimes committance and money laundering. Basically, I think it's one of the key issues that is faced by economists like the Gambia, wherein, for example, even where you have good regulations and legislations in place, somebody can commit a crime, get the cash, walk into the real estate, and just pay in millions cash, and it's accepted. So once that cash is paid to the real estate agent, the individual is able to safely lodge it into a bank as proceeds of sales of his or her property. Then the criminal would have walked away with a property that looks legitimate, which they can also further resell and place into the system. They will still have that documentary evidence that this is coming from a so-called legitimate source. I think one of the major issues, and Gambia is not alone, most of our West African countries is heavily cash-based, and therefore it's a fertile ground for financial crimes, disguising of proceeds of illicit money. And like any other economies as well, corruption is at the fore. Is the way our governments are structured, allows for corrupt practices and deviation of government funds, and that's where banks will have a very big job, very big role to make sure that whatever is channeled through, meant to be for government payments, is actually for the right purpose. I think these are some of the two, except if somebody else has something else to add.
Thank you, Ada, for that intervention.
Yes. Mr. Ansumana, sorry, I 100% concur with Ida. I think generally because of the informal nature of our economy, we are very prone to financial crime. But also, based on my observation, I've seen for the fact that we have the legal instruments, but enforcement on the part of the country is something to be contended with. It's something that needs to be improved upon.
Thank you, Mr. Kante. Another question from the participants. This one is for Aissatou. Financial crime management in banking system is fairly well structured and to a large extent effective. In your view, how can least developing countries rely on the financial crimes infrastructure in the financial system to address financial crime in the public sector?
Okay, I think as I understood, I'm going to talk on where we talk about PPP, that is public-private partnership. I think there's a need to take that part where we have private to private, where we have public to private, where we have public to public. And on that, I will touch on collaboration, because yes, we are well structured, but we, in terms of collaboration, there is a need to collaborate between the public and the private in assisting in tackling this fight. And in collaboration, we have all the law enforcement agencies, the FIs, the public, the policymakers, the regulators, to ensure that there is an effective development for an intelligence lead model There are frameworks to be developed that can be shared among in terms of that, and then also improve in technology. I don't know if I'm on the right track, if I get the question right. Improve in technology to
Yeah,
ensure
yeah, you're on track.
we work more effectively across sections, across sectors, and across borders, and in also ensuring that we have analytical capabilities within that improve technology. So to me, sharing of information can be done here as ensuring that we collaborate public and private sectors. If I get the question right, you need me to go further to tell me.
Thank you, Aisatu, for that intervention. We have another question.
I think if I heard him very well, Mr. Mbo, what he was trying to say, despite all increase in effort and investment to fight financial crime globally, there still seem to be increase in the number of financial crime cases.
Fines, exactly.
What are you, in your opinions, are the cause of this increase?
Yeah, your view. In your own views, from your own perspective, why is it increasing? Why is it not decreasing?
Yes, you know, these fines are levied on the financial institutions. And why they are levied is for them to have control mechanisms to actually protect their systems. But again, you have to remember that these crimes are committed by individuals who are outside the financial system, who are not part of the financial system. And as long as there continues to be loopholes in the laws or the financial system, they will continue to commit crimes. So definitely, for me, I think it has to do with the loopholes maybe in the laws or in financial institutions that these criminals can exploit. Because criminals will always try to commit crime. They will always commit crime.
Just to add on to what Abdullah has just said, I remember the fight against financial crimes for me is just like running to meet a moving target. So the more sophisticated financial institutions become in terms of detecting and reporting, the more sophisticated the criminals are also. So we're in the catching up game, trying to catch up against the criminals. So the more you enhance your system, the more they also prepare to take advantage of the loopholes. Also, the increase in the cost of financial crime breaches could also be looked from an angle of increased focus from the regulator perspective, increased enforcement than before. So if you look at the financial crimes compliance, it's getting more in the forefront than it used to be. So we should expect these coming. The criminals will not just sit and wait us, watch us dry of funds that they have made out of their criminal gains. They will always be running ahead, and then financial institutions will be in the catch-up game.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Now, because we are short of time, we spent almost over 1 hour, 30 minutes. So now I'll give all of you an opportunity to give a closing remarks before we end the program. So Ida, over to you for the closing remarks.
Thank you, Ansumana. It's been a wonderful 1.5 hours or 2 hours, I think, almost spent. Very meaningful. I think the participants have taken away something from these discussions. As a panelist, I think I'm really honored to be part of this discussion and then to share experience and thoughts on an issue, a burning issue, not only for financial institutions, but for global economies as a whole. So I hope we will continue this discussion. And just to carry one message away from this, and I keep saying it's the fighting of financial crimes is one area that banks or financial institutions should not compete on. It is one area that we should cooperate and coordinate for our mutual interests. Thank you.
Over to you, Mr. Kante.
Indeed, I'm very honored to be here today and to discuss on this very important topic. As a closing remark, I would want to say that the fight against financial crime is everyone's responsibility, and it cannot be done by the banks alone or the financial intelligence unit alone. It involves the active participation of everybody. More so, financial crime, it's also multifaceted, so it involves a lot of crime. Financial crime has taken many forms and many dimensions, and as a result, it is more complex to fight it on a daily basis because of the changing landscape of this problem. So my final note is that we need to work hand in hand to ensuring that we expand awareness about financial crime, and also that we cooperate with the law enforcement to ensuring that the objective of fighting financial crime is achieved. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Aisatu, over to you for the closing remarks.
Okay, thank you, Ansu. I am also honored to be here among my bosses, of course. I think my closing remark will be, we have a long way to go in terms of turning the talk into reality. My take is on, like I said, it is the fight of everyone. It is the responsibility of you and I and financial institutions, the law enforcement agencies, the regulator. Everyone should be involved. Everyone's hands should be on deck. And I'll just take on the private sector, as we are the first contact in terms of where the transaction takes place in the market, and then where we have the initial access to information and all. We're actually the first defense when it comes to the fight in financial crime. So let's all make sure we put our hands on deck, everybody. We can't just leave it to the financial system, as Adam mentioned. The customers, I will leave them behind. The regulators, everyone should be part of this fight. Thank you.
Over to you, Mr. Bo.
Yes, for me, likewise, just like my colleagues have mentioned, it is indeed an honor to be part of this great session. Honestly, it has increased a lot of the awareness that needs to be out there to the people. And like they have mentioned, coordination is very, very important in this global fight, because it's not only a Gambian fight, it's a global fight. Financial crime is a global fight. That is why the Financial Action Task Force has actually been endorsed by more than 180 countries all over the world as the global standard in the fight against financial crime. And countries are actually required to implement these recommendations. So that is why, it has taken a global approach, because of the globalness of the issue. Because crime can actually be committed from one country and the proceeds enjoyed in another country. So in that aspect, countries also need to cooperate to cooperate and to collaborate more in the fight against financial crime. So in closing, I would just like to thank the organizers of this program and urge financial institutions, DNFBPs as well, to continue the collaboration. It is not an easy fight, because criminals are always a step ahead of regulation. It's like regulation is always playing a catching game with criminals. But through cooperation and collaboration, a lot can be achieved. So once again, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, panelists, the organizers. That's the IG business, and all the participants for partaking in this forum. It's quite a useful one. I all learned a lot today about what we could do to coordinate against the fight against financial crime. This is a global issue, like the panelists have said. It is so dear to me. I'm quite passionate in this fight, because I believe this affects our communities. Funds that could have been used in the health sector, in the education sector, to improve the lives of our people, have been diverted to individual use. So to join in that fight, I think, is the responsibility of everyone. So thank you once again for your contribution by asking questions and also answering the questions. So over to you, Ibrahima, for the closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Ansumana. and the panelists. Thank you to all the participants. We really appreciate this. We at the IG Business and Finance, we are purposely set up to support the development of finance professionals in the Gambia and, let me say, across West Africa. Ansu reached out to us to discuss about the fighting of financial crime, and we said it's something, it's a very good idea. And today I've learned a lot. I was understanding the numbers. Now I could see that trillions. Imagine if we could use that trillion to fight diseases, to fight social inequalities, economic inequalities in our society. Was going into the hands of few people. You work hard, somebody will come and snag that from you, or take the national resources and put into something else. It is a very important topic, and we are happy under the Gambia Finance Leadership Forum to bring such a great panelist to discuss and enlighten us how we can all partake in fighting financial crime. It's something we should continue because the impact is very huge. That's social issues. And if I can borrow a principle in economics under Graham's law, which says that bad money tends to drive out good money. One of the things I learned about financial crime is that it can discourage foreign direct investment. I know a number of even Gambians who don't want to bring money to Gambia because they feel like it could be difficult or it could be termed as an illicit money. So we have to work together to fight this crime that's impacting all of us in one way or the other. I know we could not answer all the questions. Salif shared a link in the group chat. In case you have any question or any feedback, you can please reach out to us, and we will try to continue to contact the panelists to give us their view, and we will definitely get back to you. We have more of these events coming in. We will organize one in September again. In case you believe you have something you want to share with the public, either as a panelist or as a moderator, we are very open. This is not a platform we own as per se. We are just people who organize it, and we are very open for other people to share their thoughts, anything that will help us to develop young finance professionals, particularly in our mama land, the Gambia. Thank you once again for joining us, and have a wonderful weekend. Thank you all, Ansu, and your panelists once again. Thank you very much, and have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.